Hi, this is Jessica from CCC. Thank you for joining me today. We are going to go over the rational thinking errors, how they impact our emotions, such as with anxiety and depression, and how we can work through these struggles as they arise. Ideally, we want to better understand how our thoughts impact our emotions, which then impact our behaviors and actions. So you might be wondering what cognitive distortions are in more detail. They can be faulty or inaccurate thinking, perception, or belief, also known as rational thinking errors. It's often negativity that becomes a defining characteristic. It's a pattern of thinking that negatively interferes with a person's life and relationships. And it can lead to chronic anxiety, depression, behavioral issues, including misuse of substances.
These are all
You might be
examples of how
wondering,
our
how does this relate
feelings,
to me?
thoughts, and behaviors
When
all
you've
work
felt
together.
loved in the past, what triggered those feelings? Last time you were hungry, how did it become hangry? Last time you were upset, what thoughts occurred? Last time you were annoyed with someone, what thoughts made it feel better or worse? Or what happened that led you astray? Now we're going to go further into how it affects us on an emotional level. On this slide, we're going to talk about how it relates to anxiety. Anxiety is a mental and physical reaction to a perceived threat. Sometimes it's helpful in small doses, protects us from danger, and can enhance focus on attention to problems. If it is severe or if it occurs too frequently, it can become debilitating. A lot of times people are hesitant to say that they have anxiety. Remember, this can be examples like stress, feeling overwhelmed, feeling frustrated. Things like this are often indicators that we are experiencing some level of stress that is related to anxiety. In addition to anxiety, depression is often very common, unfortunately. Depression can be described as an illness that negatively affects how you feel, the way you think, and how you act, a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest, and it affects a person's feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. Sometimes, even anxiety and depression can affect a person at the same time, interchangeably, or due to causal factors from each other. Now let's get into the nuts and ants, which is the acronyms used to describe cognitive distortions created by psychologists Alicia Goldstein and Aaron. Nuts are negative unconscious thoughts, while ants are automatic negative thoughts. Nuts and ants both refer to negative, intrusive, and unhealthy thoughts. They can often result in anxious and depressive symptoms. They can sabotage self esteem and happiness, are characterized by rational thinking errors, and are often negative thoughts about self, the world, and the future. With the nuts being negative, unconscious thoughts, that tends to mean that these are things that occur without even really thinking about it, and that they're more at an underlying level. Whereas the ants, automatic negative thoughts, are more habit related. Essentially, rational thinking errors contribute to uncomfortable emotions and unwanted behaviors. Because thoughts occur quickly, it is common to overlook the occurrence of the irrational thinking as it is occurring. Despite the thoughts being unnoticed, a person's mood can be affected as a result of the thinking. Fortunately, there are steps to reduce irrational thinking and the negative impacts. One is to identify the rational thinking errors, and another is to reframe the thought. Today, we're going to identify 13 different thinking errors that are common in society, but are ineffective for us with working with others and in relationships, as well as having positive outcomes that we would strive for. Absolutes are thinking errors where we are more extreme, overgeneralized, and use stereotypes. Some examples include using words like always, never, everybody, nobody. You can think of it like a 0% versus 100% mentality with very black and white, no gray. These are often looking at just one solution, assuming that you do not make mistakes or errors, and then we are not considering alternatives or exceptions to the rule. Awfulizing or catastrophizing is a very negative way of thinking. It's a very exaggerated mindset, automatically assuming the worst, and it's something that tends to bring people down. Deserved luck is about believing that random events are earned by people. I can't is a phrase that we often use when making excuses for not doing something, declaring that you're not able to do it. It tends to apply that there's a reason for not doing something when usually it tends to be more of a cop out. Have to, need to, must, we often use in ways with heightened anxiety or an idea that this is the only way. We tend to say these things like, I have to do this, I need to do this way, it must be done right now. Should or shouldn't relates to a demand or expectation that we place on ourselves or others for how a person should or should not behave. And it's a way of imposing a view, value, or belief on yourself or others that is unrealistic. Blaming is a focus on who is at fault. It's different than taking responsibility and more of focusing on how it's all my fault or it's all your fault, which is a very negative ideal as opposed to one that is action oriented to make improvements. He, she, or it statements tend to make it seem like you're not in control of your feelings or emotions. It tends to be a level of deflection and a focus on somebody else, what they're doing, how it relates to your thoughts, actions, behaviors. Emotional control is a way of saying that you are not in control of your own feelings or emotions. The reality is, we do control our feelings and emotions, how we respond to circumstances. But when somebody is using emotional control, they put that responsibility onto other people, how they act, other situations that, yes, do trigger emotions. However, we still control the behaviors that come out of our emotions. Mental magic is a belief that your thoughts or feelings have a direct control on external events, or assuming that you know what other people are thinking or feeling, when the reality is, unless somebody tells us, shows us what their thoughts are, what their feelings are, we don't know what those are inside. Loaded words and put downs are insults, profanity, words and phrases that essentially that are used to trigger and promote strong feelings, strong reactions from yourself or other people. Rhetorical questions are asking questions that don't require answers, like what's wrong with you? What were you thinking? Are you crazy? These are often used to hide your thoughts in questions and they're often things that you actually don't really want an answer to or a response from, but a lot of times that they're also used to escalate a situation. And lastly, we have statements of fact. These are stating your opinions as if they're a fact, as if your opinion is automatically always correct. Here's a nice quote that helps to intertwine a lot of what we've gone over today. It really gives some perspective about how we let the things that we're dealing with in life cloud our future, our potential. If you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you are at peace, you are living in the present. I'm sure at this point you're like, all right, Jessica, so how do I work on these? There's a process called a rational self-analysis. An easy way to remember it is just remembering your ABCs. A for activating event, B for beliefs, C for consequences. On the left side of the chart, you'll notice that it's an irrational approach, and on the right side is a rational approach. Unfortunately, a lot of times what happens is in the spur of the moment, we get emotionally reactive and we tend to have the irrational approach. Ideally, we would question ourselves, think through it a little bit longer, and develop a rational approach. You'll see here in the example, it's talking about how an officer is searching a locker. So the person's thought is, the officer is searching my locker. He must know there is something not permitted inside. As they're looking at it, they're realizing that their view is essentially clouded by thoughts, feelings, and emotions. They're questioning as you go to the right whether or not these perceptions are accurate and objective, which means that we're looking at things from an outside perspective, what we see, what we hear, not just what we feel. And then ideally, we get to the rational approach, and the adjusted view of the activating event becomes the officer is searching my locker. Short, sweet, to the point. It's a snapshot without clouding it with the thoughts, feelings, and emotions, just facts. The second part that we get to is the beliefs. The irrational approach states officers only search lockers when people drop notes on you. He's working too hard. This is a belief based on assumptions and unfiltered thinking errors. Essentially, here we're going to think about if my self talk is rational. The rational approach becomes the officer is only doing his job, he searches lockers all the time. No maybe statements, no assumptions, rational beliefs based upon objective facts, and your goal here is to challenge your irrational thoughts. And the last part we have here is the consequences, which directly relates to our feelings and behaviors. We would like a desired outcome. Unfortunately, like the other examples, we often, if we're following the left side pattern, has an irrational approach, which has outcomes that we're not looking forward to or are considered undesired, such as I'm upset and worried and nervous about who told him to look in my locker. I better not have been set up. These are, again, feelings, actions, and outcomes based on assumptions and unfiltered thinking errors. Ideally, what we would like the consequences to be are more like on the example on the right. Not sure why he picked my locker, but I keep it locked and have nothing to hide, so there is no reason to worry. Feelings can be negative if based on rational facts. We would like them to be positive, but essentially sometimes they're negative too. Outcomes are outcomes, positive or negative. When we're analyzing the consequences, we're going to see somebody on the left is more emotional, is probably upset for a longer portion of their day, is anxious, whereas somebody on the right side is ideally going to be calmer, not as stressed out, and in a better place emotionally. So hopefully at this point, you've looked at that, you've heard all about these thinking errors, and your thoughts are, that looks easy. So here is a blank form. You are welcome to take a picture of it or just write down the ABCs with 2 columns so that when you're submitting, it's clear on what you're describing. You are required to use examples of the thinking errors that we went over today. You do not need to use all of them, but you do need to use some of the ones that we went over earlier that you can identify in your example. So what you want to do in this assignment, you're going to start on the left side. You're going to think of an issue that has happened recently in your life, what the activating event was, the beliefs associated with that activating event, your consequences that were the outcome of that activating event related to your beliefs. Then on the right side, you're going to challenge your thoughts, your thinking errors, essentially, and how that's affected your behaviors. At the end, you want to be able to have a desired outcome. So essentially, if you adjust your activating event thought process of what you perceived in an objective manner that really occurred, how you adjust the beliefs, like adjusting the thinking errors that you had, and then ultimately how that led to a different set of consequences from one way of thinking versus another. I will give one more example here just for relatability in case you're still struggling on where to start. Most people can relate to having been cut off while they're driving. So for the activating event, this crazy person cut me off. The beliefs, they're crazy. They don't know how to drive. They shouldn't be on the road. They don't belong having a license. The consequences, I'm mad. I may have tried to cut that person off. I've gone home upset and gotten into a disagreement with my significant other, things along those lines. If I was to adjust the activating event, the person cut me off. The belief is maybe they didn't see me. I could have been in their blind spot. I've made mistakes too. It's unfortunate, but we're also both safe, so that's excellent. Consequence, I've moved on with my day. I'm not upset. I'm not taking it out on other people, and it's been a blip on my radar as opposed to an all-day event. So hopefully you're feeling nice and prepared at this point of how to do your assignment. Essentially, you can rewind, you can look back at previous slides, you can do whatever you need to do to be able to have the information that you feel like you need to have to complete this assignment successfully. If you're really stuck, please just feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you out. You can call us or text us at 352 622 0062 with any questions or concerns. When your assignment is complete, which is due before your next class, please ensure that you submit it by text to that office cell phone. And once again, that's 352 622 0062. You can just take a picture, text the picture in, and we will get it all taken care of for you. Thank you and have an excellent day.